So here we have a piece of text that has been tracked into our background plate, the video clip of the studio. So you'll see that the text pretty much stands upright as if it were captured by the same camera that captured the scene originally. And as well as that, we have a light that we can see in the background here that was in the physical room, and that has been replicated with a virtual light as well, which is casting a shadow as if onto the ground. So this uses camera tracking, and camera tracking is quite different to the other types of tracking that you do in After Effects, such as point tracking, perspective corner pinning, because it uses an effect that sits in the effect control section, just like any other effect. Okay, so the track camera button will launch the effect, but from there on in, you're not going to be working in this area over here, you're going to be working here. So you can see that there's quite a few things in here. We have a background clip, we have our text, we have our camera that's required to capture the scene, the virtual aspects of the scene. We have a light that is here, we can see it casting a shadow. We also have a solid here, which we're going to come to a little bit later on, which is going to allow us to bring in things like videos and PNGs and place them in the scene instead of text. And we have a shadow catcher. And the shadow catcher is just basically an invisible shape, a rectangle that is used to catch the shadow. So the light casts onto the text casts its shadow onto the shadow catcher, because obviously the ground that we see in the video plate isn't actually a ground plane, it's just pixels that we can see that look like a ground. And if we switch off the shadow catcher, you'll see that the shadow goes away. So the ultimate goal here is to try and get a shot that allows you to extract as much information as you can, and that information looks like these little dots, or sorry, little targets, and that is going to allow you to do what's called a camera solve. The camera solve allows you to set up your virtual camera, which we can see if we put our views, split our views, we can see we've got a camera just here. Now I'll just try and move that. Okay, doesn't want to move. All right. So there we go. We can see our camera there. And if I select the camera, you'll see that it actually moves along a motion path here. Sorry, just my machine is just slowed down for some reason, just as I need to show you this. You can see it moving along there. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll start with a clean version of this, and I'm going to create a new composition. So we just have our video and we're going to start from scratch. So the first thing I do is I track camera. You'll see it adds the track camera 3D camera tracker effect, and you'll see that it says analyzing in background. Now what that means is that you can actually do other work. It'll just analyze away in the composition while you're doing other things. Now you'll see here that it's initializing, and when it finishes initializing, you'll start to see a percentage telling you how much of the analysis has been done, so you know how long it's going to take. So I'm going to pause this video. And we can see it just coming to the end of its analysis here, which will then allow us to start working. So it's solving the camera, which means it's now got enough information that if we want to place a camera in here, the camera will match the camera that we used originally. Right, so how we set up our camera is through the trackers. Okay, so we have all of these little colored X's. These are actually called our trackers or track points. Now you can, if you want to, you can increase their size. And when you do, you'll actually notice that the ones in the foreground are bigger than the ones in the background, which shows us that the tracker was able to solve the scene. It's able to know, it knows where the background is, and it knows kind of enough about the geometry of the room that we'll be able to work with it. Now there's a few ways you can work with these track points. First of all, you need to kind of move to the point of the clip where you know you're going to have the most action, or the focus of your clip is going to be. So in this case, it's going to be around here, because this is where I'm going to be placing the piece of text when we kind of swoop in towards it. So you can hover here. I'll actually pull back a bit. Yeah. You can hover in here, and when you hover between any 3 track points, it will suggest a target. Now the target is the little red circle, and that's what we're going to attach our objects to. Or you can manually select 3 or more, and then put your cursor in the middle of the target and slide it around to see if it looks like it's sliding along a ground plane or along the floor as we're looking at it in our clip. Click, click, click. Right click, set ground plane and origin. Create text and camera. Create shadow catcher and light. Create solid. Okay. Now we have everything we need. So what we can do is we can click away from that now, and we can see our objects. And if we wanted to, we could go into Draft 3D, and we can see that our ground plane has also been set up there. Now the ground plane is particularly useful if you have a scene that has a very clear, recognizable geometry to it, such as footpaths on a road or something like that, or a tabletop. It's less useful here because we just have a kind of a flat surface. But what it is handy for the point of origin is that we now have our objects lining up perfectly 0, 0, 0. So if, for example, I wanted to bring a new piece of text in here, I would just create the text, turn it into 3D, set the position to 0, 0, 0. And the other thing that you'll find with this, which is a little bit counterintuitive, is you also need to set the scale quite high as well, in this case over 1000%. But if you can do that and set it to 0, 0, 0, then you'll be able to bring in as much new text here as you want, or solids and so on. Now, I would still recommend that you create all of them at the outset so that you don't have to go through that process. Now I'm going to switch off the solid. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. So what I'm looking to do, first of all, is see if it tracks. So you can see the light in the background there, and the text is pretty nicely stuck to the ground there. So what I'll do is I will move it slightly to get it away from that chair, and I'm going to pull up its rotation property, and I'm going to rotate it or hinge it upwards around the X axis. So I go to 90 on the X, and you'll see it pops up, the light shines on the back of it, puts it into silhouette, and it casts a shadow. So we're seeing the effects now of the other 3D objects, and we can start working with them, such as our shadow catcher. First thing we need to do there is scale it up. And the other thing that we might want to do is get the text back to its original color by going to the material options and saying accepts lights off. Oh, that's the wrong object. Right, that's not what we want. We want that definitely on. It's the text. Okay. Accepts lights off. Goes back to purple. Okay, so we have our shadow, which looks a little bit off. It's kind of going in the wrong direction compared to the other shadows in our scene. So I'll go to my light, and I'll open up its position properties, and I'll say, right, okay, this shadow looks a bit wonky compared to these, so I might want to pull it across on the X so that the shadows start to kind of go off in a different direction. And it might make sense as well to push it back in Z space so that the shadows get a bit longer. Hold down Shift if you need to go a little bit faster or further. And so that just makes them look a little bit too blurry. So I'm going to pull back a little bit, and let's see what else we could do. Maybe pull it down, push it back again, or pull it in rather. So I'm looking for a harder shadow. So I'm getting the text a little bit closer. Okay, so you're going to just be kind of balancing these off each other. So I can go back up a little bit a bit further back. You know, you can, there's a lot of ways you can do it. Now, I'll just pull it across again. Now, so that's looking a little bit more the way I might want it to look based on the other shadows. So this is most of the process when you're just animating a piece of text. So let's just zoom in, play through that. Or sorry, not when you're animating a piece of text, but when you're incorporating a piece of text. So we have everything that we need now set up basically so that we can move on and do other kinds of objects. So I'll switch off my text. I'll leave my light. That's fine. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch back on my solid. Now the solid is going to be used as a placeholder for bringing in other objects. We're going to use a piece of video. So what I would generally do is I would duplicate anything that I'm going to be using and just lock and hide the original, and then leave the one that I want to work with out. Now, so I'm going to find a piece of video, and I'm not going to drag it in the normal way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select the solid, and then I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, and then I'm going to drag it down and do a swap. Okay, now, so we'll see we have a piece of video here. It's pretty small. Now, we're also looking at the anchor point being in the middle of the clip. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my Move Anchor Point tool, hold down Control, and then snap it down to the bottom. Reason being that I want to also rotate this up 90 degrees so it's standing upright. Whoops, wrong one. That should have been my X rotation. There we go. Now, same thing happens. The light catches it and it just turns it black. So we need to go into the material options here and accepts lights off. Now, I can scale this up now to get a little bit more of our character. Pop that into full. And I'm going to do a very quick key light. So that we can get him kind of standing upright on his own. Okay, so it won't be the nicest key, but you'll get the idea of what we're going for. Back into final result. And the last thing we need to do, just throw a mask around that so that we don't have the edges showing. Okay. Right, so now we have, okay, one more thing. We need to, whoa, that's a long shadow. Okay, so we need to probably move that light up. And slightly to the left. Okay. Now the shadow catcher can be any size, so it doesn't really matter. Now, and I'd say we'd probably want to soften that shadow a little bit as well. And bring it down in darkness. Or up in brightness, whatever you want to call it. Oh, that didn't take hold. Okay. Now, so we have our guy moving, and you can see the shadows catching his movement. It looks very realistic, apart from the fact that he's got no legs. And this is how you would go about bringing in additional objects into your scene so that you can work with some things other than text. I'll just let this render. And he'll disappear towards the end, but that's fine. Okay, I'll stop it there. And that is camera tracking in After Effects. tracker effect just to see what these settings are for. So we have a scene already set up here, and we can select our camera tracker effect to bring up our track points. So what we have up here is we have the first thing we have our analyze button, and this is basically only required when you've changed some setting up here. Now a lot of the time it will automatically analyze every time you change a setting, but if you need to manually click analyze, you can do it here. And this would also be used if you were to find the effect the long way, which is also in here somewhere. I don't know, because I would never use this way of applying the effect. I would just go track camera over here. Now the shot type is currently set to fixed angle of view. Now fixed angle of view means that it's shot with a lens that doesn't zoom in or out. Phones, unless you're using that kind of fake digital zoom, have a fixed angle of view. If you're working with a camera with a zoom lens but you don't touch the zoom lens, then it is a fixed angle of view. Or if you're using a lens with a fixed focal length, such as a 50mm lens, that is also fixed. Basically, if you're not zooming in or zooming out in the middle of the shot, it's a fixed angle of view. Alternatively, if you do zoom in or zoom out during the shot, you have a variable zoom in your shot. Now, this would be a little bit more intermediate and advanced in that the tracker can sometimes have trouble picking up on the zoom. So I would say when you're beginning this process, just work with a fixed angle and use your body to move the camera around to get the nice movement into your shot. Now, specifying the angle of view is for when you want to get real accuracy into your track. You might be shooting with a GoPro or a Panasonic camera that you can actually see the lens angle. It'll tell you exactly what it is, and you can pop that in here, and you can input it so that it gives you an exact result. Okay, now I'm going to go back to fixed angle. You see how it automatically solves the camera each time. Now, showing the track points simply means that you're showing the solved track points post-analysis. Okay, now if you render the track points, then they will be visible in your shot even when the effect is deselected. If you don't have that selected, every time you click away from it, it just deselects the effect and you can't see. The track point size are how big are these little tracker X's, and you can make those bigger or you can make them smaller. And the target size, once you have a target created, you can make that bigger or smaller. Okay, and that will affect the size of the text that comes in also. So that's the camera tracker effect. 90% of the time you'll just leave it in the default, but if you do find yourself with a particular camera and you know the lens angle of view, I would suggest that you pop it in there.